right, everybody. Hello. Welcome to the next live stream. Okay, so where am I broadcasting this from? I am actually broadcasting this right from the lab that we have as part of the professional writing program here at York, and I wanted to try it just to see what it's like in solidarity with you all, knowing that you are doing this, you're starting your programs and so forth, you are out there in the world. I'm just going to check to make sure that it's actually broadcasting and all that sort of good stuff. Yep, we got it on there. Looks good. Says we're live. So it's almost like when I'm doing this, I've got, a double layer of sound isolation. If you've been on this stream before, you've been checking it out, you know that I'm interested in sound and composing and things like that, and ways that you can kind of use your means to record. And I think actually a mask is a way of doing it. So again, just wanted to try it. I'm in our lab down in McLaughlin College. We, as part of the professional writing program and digital writing classes, we have a lab where we can do this kind of stuff. And so, yeah, this is kind of a usability test, if you will, just to see how it sounds. So, yeah, let me know if you have any sort of comments about that, and we'll see how it goes on the actual stream. Okay, folks. So, a couple things I want to start announcing is that we, as always, are back with you doing this 1-hour stream. Today's topic is writing for accessibility. Now, this is an even interesting thing because if you're doing streams and you're wearing a mask in a place where you need to, like we do at York, and rightly so, hope you're all staying safe, by the way. We might have some challenges, right, with accessibility. I'm not sure how well my voice comes through on this mic, if it's too loud and so forth. I've got my headphones on. What's at stake when you're thinking about accessibility? It really prompts you to think about all the ways that there may be barriers between you and your audiences, right? They may have hearing challenges. They may need screen readers and things like that. And I think more and more people in digital spaces are being mindful of what those potential audiences may be requesting and which may benefit them. And certainly this is something I'm passionate about as an editor, and I'm trying to be even more and more mindful of these accessibility practices. I'm going to talk about some of those before we have a guest speaker later on with the student-run newspaper Excalibur. We'll be speaking with Sarah Garofalo later on. Okay, so let's start. Before we begin, I just want to have a couple shout-outs. So once again, thanks to Writing Center Director John Suffren and the Writing Center staff, as well as the Writing Department, for their support of doing this Get Rid live stream. Always a pleasure to be doing this, and I continue to learn more and more about writing processes as I do this. And we've got some nice speakers, great speakers coming up. Like I said, today we've got one next week, and then in a few weeks we'll have even more. So we're moving on through this. It's going really well. I think I've been enjoying it. And also, if you're attending the Writing Center, whether you're on campus now or you're not, just remember you can sign up for one-on-one appointments always right through this link. And we have live appointments that are face-to-face and mostly virtual right now, but those are an option. And we also have them available through online paper submissions. So again, I hope that goes well if you signed up for them. I certainly wish I used it more when I was an undergraduate, and I hope you all do find some benefit from it. Okay, so topic today, let's move on to that. Accessibility, as we were sort of talking about, is a critical facet of digital media writing, especially when you're putting things on the web. You have to make sure that they're readable with screen readers, to make sure when you're doing audio that you have transcripts, right? When you are posting images, you want to have some kind of indication of what the caption is. So there's some ways to start thinking about that, and I want to talk about that for a few minutes before we speak with our guest. Okay, just checking to make sure we're all good on that angle. Okay, so this is the tab I have. Now, this is a pretty straightforward one. This is also linked in the chat if you want to check it out later. just for practice purposes, or not linked in the chat, excuse me, it's linked in the show description. So writing for accessibility, this is by the Web Accessibility Initiative. And I think that even though this is talking about writing for the web and ways to think accessibly, there's some really good helpful guidelines for even if you're doing things in print context, right? So some basic considerations to think about when you're working with sort of digital text and you're kind of writing in those ways. So provide informative, unique page titles. So, some examples they offer are Space Teddy Inc., the name of the organization. So again, if like you have sub pages with Space Teddy Inc., which sounds kind of interesting, right? I think I would want to like read a web page on sort of spacey teddy bears and things like that. I'm sure my son would be very happy. And then you have rich descriptions or some specific descriptions about the organizations and the page names that sort of follow. So ensuring that you're kind of clear, providing a short title, and then so that we know what the page is about and sort of what that main heading is of the website. So put the most unique, relevant information first, and then the organization. This is a lot like having subheads in a essay that you might be working on. I don't know how your professors sort of get you to think about subheads, right? But I like them because it helps break up the information in a way that's easy to digest. So if it's a couple paragraphs under a subheading, for example, if the main topic is about, spacesuit teddy bears or something like that, you can have one subsection that's just about the equipment that goes into that. I'm just going off the cuff at this point about that. But headings and page titles are super helpful for following along. Now, it's another way, on that topic, using headings to convey meaning and structure. So if you have a group of related paragraphs and sections, using different subheadings can really help that information pop out, especially if you're doing something like instructions, right? So if this is a set of instructions here on the left, whether this is on a web page or in a document, the lack of subheadings may make it difficult to follow like a step-by-step set of instructions. Whereas here we see like this could be, instructions about how to assemble your teddy bear or to launch out into space. And step one may be the next subheading. And so there are all kinds of different ways you can label this, but usually it's like heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. If you're working with HTML code or you're even working with WordPress, usually they have those options already for you. So this is another inline example of this. You may have, a large heading here that announces what the main topic is, and then you have the subsection. This could be like overview of spacesuit teddy bears, and this next one could be instructions of how they're assembled, and then the next one could be a smaller list. So you're kind of breaking it up into various bits so that it's easier to follow. And I'll show you how that kind of plays out in web formats in just a bit. Let me check my messages. I think I just got one. Okay. So to make sure someone's not saying like, hey, you sound like garbage. But again, I'm happy to do this. I'm happy to try it. Just want to see how things sort of sound. Okay. The next suggestion they have is to make link text meaningful. So that it describes the content of the link target. Avoid using ambiguous link text such as click here or read more, which is really popular with a lot of us, like to do that. Indicate relevant information about the link target, such as document type size, for example, proposal documents. Now, what that means is you essentially, like, you're prompting people with this one, right, to click and move somewhere. You can even do this in, print documents. But to hyperlink it within the actual text, so read more about device independence would be more meaningful in their view than doing something like on the left. So you wouldn't say, for more information about device independence, click here, right? As they would sort of say, you just want to link it right within there so that it's clear what it's about. I understand why people want to do this, and I'm even I have a habit of doing it because it's kind of a prompt, right? It's a command, like click here to read this. This one is a bit more passive, we might say, but given within accessibility guidelines, it's more on point. So again, like those don't open right now, but you can get, you know. Now this is a really big one, folks, that I think a lot of us could continue keeping in mind is writing meaningful text alternatives for images. So as they sort of say here, for every image, write alternative text that provides the information or function of the image. For purely decorative images, there is no need to write alternative text. Okay, so this is an uninformative example they have here. Charging the phone, connect the phone to a power outlet using the cable and power adapter provided. Now, this would be like the sort of supplemental text you would see, but it just says charging phone. So it's descriptive in that sense, just a little bit, but this gives us more information. So we have the step-by-step instruction, and then we have alternative text for the image. Plug cable into the bottom edge of the phone. So again, this is like sort of a way of ensuring that if a screen reader is reading this, it can tell that person what's happening. And it just generally, alternative text can be really valuable even if you don't use screen readers. It's usually not visible though. So, if you're highlighting over something, sometimes you'll see what it looks like. Here's an example. Let's try to find one like on the YorkU webpage. Let's see if we can find an image. So if we were to click on this, what does that tell us? Yeah, so I'm not seeing that, but what we can do is check out the web page on the web checker and see. Sometimes if you're just highlighting over it, it will actually expand it for you. Okay, now on to that topic and more about descriptions and so forth. You want to have transcripts with your media. So if you are having an audio-only content such as a podcast, provide a transcript. This is something I do with my students when I'm working through this process. For audio and visual content, such as training videos, also provide captions. Including the captions, transcripts and captions is spoken information and sounds that are important for understanding the content. For example, door creaks. For video transcripts, also include a description of the important visual content, such as, for example, Ethan leaves the room. And there's in this description a lot of good information about making audio and visual media accessible. So here's what I mean by that. If you go to the YorkU webpage, this is a video that they have sort of baked into it. You can't hear it right now because I'm playing music and so forth. But, even if we don't have any music or sounds, we need some descriptions about what we're seeing. So this is what it looks like. And as you can see, it's timestamped. So if somebody were wanting to kind of experience this without even watching it, and they needed they were looking for a transcript just to maybe get a sense of what's going on, this is in line with what they would ask for accessibility purposes. So again, I'm not hearing any of that music right now, but then nothing's actually spoken. But still, this is useful information for anyone who may not be able to enjoy or engage with that kind of content. So they have numerous suggestions there. I'll just say, for example, like I recently did a piece with students that was published in a journal, and we had to do transcripts for all of our pieces. And here's what it looks like. This is on a Canadian mixtape of something we published recently as a team. And my example, it was like this. So this is like sort of what I published it as. You can see like I had sort of lo-fi music baked into it. It fades in and then the music fades out. So it's a script, really. You can kind of think about what are you introducing in addition to your voice that would help people understand the kind of tone or moods you're sort of conveying, especially if they're just reading it in some way or another. So again, that's another example of that. But transcripts they're something oftentimes I've even seen working for a journal that usually come later in the process. We have to ask people to submit them. And then, if we're not sort of engaging with us that often, it could be, maybe a little difficult to remember to submit those. But I like them too. As an instructor, I find them really helpful because I can go through and listen to the transcripts and read it at the same time, and then mark up areas I think that are kind of important. All right, so okay, cool. Great. So we just spoke with, I'm checking in with Sarah Garofalo. She is going to join us here in a little bit. So a couple other things we can talk about. Keep the content clear and concise. So this is really just good general information for any kind of text you're working through, even if it's high dense academic paper, right? Write in short, clear sentences and paragraphs. Avoid using unnecessarily complex words and phrases. Consider providing a glossary of terms readers may not know. So let's say like you're kind of in the mire of a really dense article or something like that, or you feel like you're kind of writing in inside baseball sort of senses. This is a way to be a little, having a glossary or some kind of footnotes or something like that is something you can gesture towards later, or you can provide that as an appendix at the end of your piece. Also, you could hyperlink to other text, right? If you're doing this on the web, maybe you can link to like certain key terms, right? That might be useful for your readers. And this is mainly in the technical end, so feel free to kind of think about those elements. And then we are going to turn to a discussion with Sarah Garofalo in just a minute. Sarah, I think you're on the line, so I'll introduce you in just a minute. So hello. But one last thing I want to say is that in the notes, and we'll talk about this at the end too, that you can actually, the show description, I have a link to this thing called the Wave Web Accessibility Evaluation Tool. And if you're ever wondering like how your text looks and may be rendered by screen readers, you can move it to take this tool and plug it into the Wave Accessibility Checker. So this is the live stream link series that we have. And you can see that the screen reader is checking for errors, contrast errors, alerts, features, all that sort of stuff. It'll tell you where the headings are, what you're using, and it'll also tell you things like, not necessarily an error, but it'll say, hey, at the bottom you have a nearby image that has the same alternative text. So if it's about York and they're laid side by side, you may want to think about changing that up. I know that York is committed to accessibility in a lot of different ways, so I imagine that we weren't going to see a lot of errors on this, but still it's pretty interesting information. All right, so let me bring on our guest now, and we'll chat for just a little bit. Okay. Sarah, you there? Hi.
Yes, I'm there. Hi.
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm doing all right. How's everything going?
Fine. If you're just joining on the stream too, I know you are. Like, I am streaming right from our lab in the professional writing lab we have here. So, don't know how it sounds on the audio rendering end, but plan made good enough. Yeah. But again, I wanted to try this out to see sort of what's at stake when we're doing this kind of stuff, and just all the sort of maneuvers we have to make right now while we're going back to campus, right? So, are you back to campus this term?
I will be back on campus in a week. So I'm still here now, but I will be back soon.
Yes, I'm here next week officially for my class, but I was sort of trying things out right now just to see what it was like, and I'm pleased to say that I even set off an alarm accessing the lab, and got that all fixed up. But
it's a good welcome.
Yes, you live and learn, right? So, okay, so let me just go ahead and introduce you for a little bit. You are the editor-in-chief of Excalibur.
Yeah, co-editor-in-chief. It's myself and then my co-editor-in-chief, Jonathan.
Oh, excellent. All right, cool. So Sarah is a fourth-year student of film studies at York. right? And actually, we had a few classes together. So you were in my journalism ethics class and then writing in digital cultures. So it's always nice to reconnect with you. And Sarah's passionate about using writing as a tool to educate herself and introduce others to hidden stories and new ideas. In the future, she hopes to continue her studies in film and merge it with her love of writing and journalism. You can always find Sarah sketching, painting, and endlessly watching films while waiting to get back into movie theaters. So, when's the last time you've been to a movie theater, Sarah?
Oh, gosh. I went to go see Halloween Kills in October, but that was also the first movie I had seen since the entire pandemic shut down. So in the past 3 years, I've seen one in theaters.
Okay, yeah. I saw, oh my gosh, what was it? Was it another Marvel movie? I can't remember, but I went recently and we couldn't actually have anything to drink or eat.
Yeah, you got to.
So we just sort of, we just sat there. I was like, oh, this is, I don't know about this, but it was just nice to hang out with family. So
yeah, it takes away a little bit from the experience, but it does slowly getting back.
Exactly. Yeah. And then Excalibur, I just want to say a few words about it, just from the bio page that they had. So Excalibur, it's the student-run community newspaper of York University, autonomous from any university body since 1966, which is very impressive. Excalibur continues a tradition of publishing articles, photos, and other media as York's primary source of information. The newspaper boasts an audience of over 60,000 students, faculty, staff, alumni, and community members. As an institution at York University for over 50 years, Excalibur's alumni can be found in all corners of the media industry. Now, this is so close to my heart because I got my start in writing studies and creative writing, especially working for the newspaper. And it was a big adjustment, right? To write in a newsy kind of way, right? It was really important for my process.
Yeah, very similar for me as well. I never really had experience in professional writing, I guess you could say. It was more just personal writing, fiction writing, that kind of thing. So last year I started out as assistant news editor, and it was definitely a learning curve trying to go from just writing for myself versus now I need to write for an audience. But because of that, it's given me a lot of tools to figure out, okay, now here's how I can actually do it. So it's been really beneficial.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I remember my friends, they were in journalism and I was in creative writing, and they said, why don't you just come write for us and just try it out, And it was a nice space to kind of cultivate that voice or practice for writing for different audiences, because they were my friends and they were going to give me really good feedback and give me multiple times to work on a draft. And I wish I could dig up my original piece. It was just so funny. It was a review of a soft kind of news report of a speaker that came in.
Mm-hmm.
And, I wrote it very creatively and sort of set the scene and did all these quotations. And they were like, no, you just need to go straight forward. Here's what happened. Here's what he said.
Yep.
And here's what some students said. And it's so interesting.
Yeah, mine was very similar, where it's instead of just doing the who, what, when, where, why, it was me explaining this and this and this and from my eyes. And then the first draft was like, no, get rid of all that. That's
yep.
that's no.
Yep. You got to cut it out. Yeah. So, okay. So I have some questions for you I want to run through, and let me just pop them up because I realized I didn't copy into my document that you and I were working through. Okay, there we go. Because, most journalists and interviewers have some questions. They may seem very natural, but we're working through it, behind the scenes, stuff like that. Okay, so you are co-editor-in-chief with Jonathan Holden, right?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Tell me about that role as editor-in-chief for co-editor-in-chief, for Excalibur.
Yeah, so our Spark Notes duty is we hire, train, and then guide the rest of the ed board. So our editorial board consists of Jonathan and myself as co-editor-in-chief, and then we have a news and assistant news editor, an arts editor, a sports editor, a health editor, and then we have a creative manager who does our social media and our photos. And kind of our job is to not only work alongside with them, but also help guide them. The really interesting thing about Excalibur is that for many universities, they have journalism programs, and the paper is kind of built in with that, but we don't actually have a journalism undergraduate program here at York. So everybody's coming into this kind of on the same playing field, meaning Jonathan was in professional writing, but other than that, the rest of us don't really have experience in professional writing or in journalism. So a lot of our job is not only learning on the job, but also working with, our editorial board who doesn't have experience in journalism. And that's the thing we always say when we're hiring is the number one thing they say is, well, I don't have experience in this. And it's like, good. In certain ways, that's almost even better, is if we can all start off on a blank slate. But yeah, our day-to-day jobs is kind of the big thing that we do is approving pitches that come in from our editorial board, and then also that come in from outside in the community. We've gotten a couple of them this semester where we have students emailing me saying, I heard this, or I've got this email, like, is there anything we can do with this? And then I take it upon myself to kind of investigate it a little bit more, try to find more behind it and see if the claim has any merit. And if it does, it's something that we bring to our editorial board, and then they can pitch.
Nice.
And when people from outside the community and our editorial board pitch us stories, pitch us ideas, it's up to Jonathan and myself to go in and approve them or alter them. The biggest thing being is, what if people are pitching us something, is it going to affect your community? So everything that we do, we kind of have to have that goal in mind of, how does this fit in with the York community? Because we get a lot of stories that are really, really important, really interesting, pertinent stories, but if they don't affect York and our community, it's going to be kind of hard to run them for us. So apart from pitching, another thing that we do is we do editing. Jonathan is interesting because he's also our copy editor in addition to being co-editor-in-chief. So he does all of our copy edits, which are the fact-checking, punctuation, grammar, all of the nitty-gritty stuff. And then what the editor-in-chief kind of does for Excalibur is I go in and we do like substantive editing, making sure everything flows, making sure everything that's there is pertinent, making sure there aren't any issues or contradictions. And then we send it off to get published. But yeah, that's mainly what the editor-in-chief does here, is not only do we guide the editorial board and approve their stuff, we also kind of learn alongside with them. Because there'll be a lot of times where, let's say, our news editor kind of asks us, like, how should we go about this? And neither Jonathan or myself have encountered it before. So it's a lot of working with our board of publishers as well, who are old Excalibur staff, and they kind of guide us as well. So I'm rambling, but that's mainly what we do there, in addition to doing, like, we also work on stories and our features and editorials, but it's more so guidance than actually physically writing for the paper now.
Great. Yeah. And that's, valuable in and of itself, right? It's often like a path we move into is we write first and then we move into editing, and we get to see those different ways. And I feel like for me, when I've been editing, it actually teaches me a lot about the writing process. I feel like a better writer.
Yes.
Because I can kind of anticipate what the moves might be from the editor. So I can go like, okay, I think they're going to probably ask for this, so I need to get in front of this sort of thing. And that's not like a adversarial position by any means. It's just more of, I just know you get into the editor's mind a little bit. Like,
yeah, you do. I was really nervous coming into it because I was like, I've never really been in I don't want to say leadership position, but at least for like a publication leadership position. And I was afraid I wasn't going to catch things here and there, but as you go on, you kind of get a hold of it more. And it'll be one of those things where I'll notice something that was wrong, and Jonathan, who was my copy editor last year for my stuff, was like, yeah, you used to make that mistake. So learn as you go on.
Interesting. Yeah. How about that? So let's talk a little bit more about what that process entails. You said you were an assistant editor when you started, right? And then you moved into this role. So, why go for the top position, the top tier position, like as you're finishing things up and things of that sort?
So I was actually hired back this year as our news editor, and that was going to kind of be my plan moving forward. And then unfortunately, our editor-in-chief that we had lined up had to step down right before the school year started. So when talking with our board of publishers, it came to the idea of, okay, now we need to hire a new editor-in-chief. And I decided to put my hat in the ring. I said, you know what? I think not only would it help the process because I've been here for a year, obviously not trained as editor-in-chief, but I have experience of how the paper runs, and so does Jonathan. So we stepped up not only for that, but I kind of realized in that moment, like, this was an opportunity that I might as well take. It's here. It's something that I'm passionate about. After working with this paper for a year, I've come to really enjoy being a part of Excalibur, and I thought, why not help out the team and maybe step into that leadership role? Also, this might sound a little selfish, and I don't mean it to be, but also this opens a lot of doors, right? Being able to say that you work in a journalism publication, and not only have you worked at it, but you've also helped run it. It's something that I think moving forward, if I were going to journalism, I'll now have the experience not only in writing, but also in editing and running a team in scheduling, pitching, all that kind of stuff. And I just think that would be a benefit for the field that I kind of plan to go into.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier you and Jonathan are kind of on the side of managing, how the things just comes together and communicating with audiences as well as contributors, your staff, and so forth. I mean, what does your weekly production schedule look like?
Yeah, so what the schedule that we usually work on is that we are a weekly publication. And each section has a certain number of stories that are put out for a week. So for news, we have 5. And then for arts and for health, it's 2. And then for sports, it's either 1 or 2, depending on what's happening that week in terms of sport. So the way that it's usually run is that on the weekend is when our like heavy writing, heavy editing days are. We try to get everything in, copy edited, my edited, finalized by our writers by Sunday or Monday, depending when it's going to be going out on the weekly schedule. We usually send out the stories, like we schedule them a couple days in advance. So we like things to be done on the weekend. How the pitching looks is our editors have the weekend to pitch a story to us. It can be, from Friday to Sunday. And then Jonathan and myself go in on Sunday, approve all the stories. If nothing needs to be fixed, we send it back and say like, hey, here are some things that we could probably improve on. And then we send out all of our pitch lists to our contributors on Monday. Our contributors usually get the first say. So we have a Facebook group. We've got an email chain that we send out just like a Google Doc saying like, here's what we have for this week. If you want to sign up, please let us know within 24 hours. And then we'll sign our volunteers up for articles. So usually by Tuesday, our articles are signed up for, everything's good to go. And that is when all of our editors and our contributors will send out requests for comments from whoever it may be, associations, students, faculty, external groups. And how they write is kind of up to them. They have the week to, if they want to focus on one day writing or if they want to write a little bit here and there, totally up to them. We don't really police that. It's kind of everybody writes at their own pace. But we have our deadlines on the weekend so that we can schedule them to go out for the week. Those are for our regular stories. We do have every single person on our editorial board each semester has to write a feature and has to write an editorial. Those have their own little dates. Editorials are quite quick. It's usually just an opinion. There's no sources. It's just you writing something and then calling to action for the community. Those are usually a bit quicker, but our features that are about 2,000 words and have a couple sources, we give our editors like ample time to pitch the idea, work on the idea, and then instead of just giving them 2 days to edit it, we give them a little more time that we can.
Okay.
Yeah,
that sounds reasonable. Okay, so that's the schedule, right? And then once you start getting submissions in, whether it's from your board or from contributors in the community, staff writers generally, what kind of advice are you generally giving them about their submissions? You find like something a ground you cover, and you may know, like, just from my from my angle as a professor, like sometimes there are common threads you can see in essay writing, right? Like source use and integration. But news writing, it's a little different, right? It requires like a pretty straightforward style, and that's why I wanted to bring you on, especially because you have to write in a way that reaches those 60,000 people. Hopefully in a pretty similar way, as far as I know, but maybe you can talk about that. Like, what advice do you typically give for writing in the style of Excalibur?
Yeah, so if we're talking about news in particular, but then also it goes for health and arts and sports as well, but specifically news, you really kind of need to stick to the who, what, where, when, why, and how. I think an issue that we get sometimes with like outside submissions for, let's say, news stories is we sometimes get like personal opinion added in, or we get those, at the beginning of an essay when people always go like, since the dawn of time, blah, 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 blah. We kind of get those filler sentences. And I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to news writing is those fillers don't really have a place. Those filler words are great for something like an editorial or like a feature where you get a little bit more personal expression in there. But when it comes to news writing, I think the biggest thing that we see is that you really have to stick to, is this, like, can we prove this? Is this fact? And then also from the interviews and the sources that we got ourselves. For me, I think another issue that we get is when somebody conducts an interview, when we write the article, they'll include one sentence from the 20-minute interview, which, depending on time limit or word count, that makes sense. But oftentimes they're saying really important, like pertinent things that can be added in. So I always try to encourage people who are writing is we will never turn down voices, essentially. For our news articles, we always try to get at least two. At least two is like the minimum. But if you get 4 voices, like we will gladly include it. So that's one thing I always try to push for our news writing to do as well, is when we say conduct your own research, we don't want to just rely on what the Globe and Mail is saying. We don't want to just rely on what CBC News is reporting. We want to do our own work and do our own, investigation, our own writing, our own interviewing. So that's, I think, the biggest thing for us. And it's a little nerve-wracking. It definitely is, because people are coming into this job never having conducted interviews before and never having, worked in publications like this before. So they get a little nervous, but we try to work with them and tell them, like, we're all students here. We're all starting off like fresh slate. There's no hierarchy here. We all are just starting off together. Trying to get people comfortable with the idea of, this is your article. It's not an essay where you need to have this many sources and this many, citations. That's one thing we get a lot too, is people will hand in news articles with like citations. Not really the point that we're doing. So I think the biggest thing is sticking to the facts, but also doing your own research. That is more than just, looking up another article.
Right. Yeah. And that's a hard thing to do, especially if you're working on a weekly schedule and, these other daily institutions like CBC and Globe and Mail have a lot of time and resources to do things quickly. And I certainly, when I was an editor or a writer for, it was called Community Press. It was basically like an offshoot of a daily. We would kind of be at the will of what the Enquirer would be saying while we were writing, because they could do it faster. They would do it on a daily basis. But my editor always told me, he said, what's the follow-up thing? Now, news broke about this particular incident, let's say, but what's the follow-up that like wasn't covered? It's one thing to cover the daily incident. It's another to think about the next steps about, so it's almost like forward writing in the ways.
Difficult. And people put just stories, and they're stories that have kind of been done to death. They're stories that are being covered, here, there, everywhere, and that don't really pertain to your community. So what I always try to do, instead of just shutting anything down, it's okay, how can we make this relate back to York? Like, why should a York community member care about this while they're at this university? And that's what we try to do. That's why a lot of our stories do include like student voices, because we want to hear what they have to say. So instead of just talking about X, Y, and Z, it's okay, how does X, Y, and Z affect not only York faculty, but how does it affect community members? How does it affect students? And that's what we try to do with it. Or we try to talk about stories that, in a light, how do they affect the York community?
Yeah, and it's for appeal, right? Especially to the readership. I was kind of wondering about this. This is something I remember being in terms of identification and accessibility was when you're talking about York members. Is there a style or a preference you have with identifying like a professor or somebody on the campus? Are you able to kind of, is the assumption like that they'll know who that professor is, or do you just go for the full title, things like that? Like I see here, it's sort of saying like Stephen Gatz, like professor in the Faculty of Education. I just remember at York or at Northern Kentucky University, we would just say like professor in this department or something like that. Like there's sometimes I would forget, like we should probably be a little more specific in case anybody encounters our paper like in public, because it's it's on the web, it's free.
Yeah, we usually try to include either the faculty or department area. We don't need to go into like full specific. If it's like a 3-sentence long title, we don't have to put the full thing, but like we have to the professor in the Faculty of Education. That's usually what we need to identify. When it comes to like students, because we'll get student voices often, what we need from them is we need their full name, and we need their year of study, and then we need their program. So if they're talking about me, if I were to be a voice, it would be, Sarah Garofalo, 4th year student in film studies. We just need those things to identify. Of course, when it comes to the idea of anonymous and whatnot, that's a little bit different. But yeah, whenever we get faculty members, we would need their full name and then their official title. And then from their official title, if it's a little bit too long, we take the important stuff, which is what department or what faculty do they work in.
Yeah. Excellent. Do you want to talk about something you recently wrote?
Ooh.
You can search it up if you want. Yeah.
Sure. I would say the most recent thing that I wrote that I think is pretty important is I did a feature, and my feature was about students finding jobs after the pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
I believe it's that one right there, Fearing the Future.
Yes, I know. This is probably close to your heart because you're finishing up with us, right?
Very,
Yeah,
very.
yeah, yeah.
You're getting nervous. And the idea kind of came from that. Whereas the features, they can be a little bit more abstract. They don't necessarily need to be like York news, York health news, York arts news. But it's in the same thing of like, what would the community find interesting? What would the community want to read about? And that could be anything. I've done features in the past about the paranormal and ghost hunting, and I've done features about like metal bands. So it's just kind of like working for the community doesn't necessarily have to be specifically York news. So this one kind of came to me when I was sitting thinking of an idea and then also filling out grad school applications and job applications all within like the same day. So with this this feature, it was really great because I got to speak to not only students who are also in the same boat as me, who are going to be graduating very soon and are nervous about the future, but I also spoke to the career services here at York, and I spoke to Toronto Employment Services. And I don't want to say that it was a little jarring, but it was kind of like a consensus of like, yeah, it is totally normal to be scared because you guys are entering a market that is a little bit scary. And that was the great thing about it is I tried to give as much resources at the end. That's always what I try to do if we're talking about even if it's a news article, if it's something that I think students should be looking into, I always try to include at the end, like, here are ways students can get involved, or here are ways students can work through this. So talking to like Toronto Employment Services and talking to the Career Development Center were really, really beneficial because these are two sources that like students who read this can go out and work on themselves. Yeah, this was probably I think the most recent thing that I've written and was very passionate about it. That's one thing I always try to tell people when they're doing features or editorials or even like op-eds from external community members. Write about something that you're passionate about and it will go a lot quicker, it'll go a lot easier, and you're going to enjoy the end product a lot more versus if you're writing something that you feel like you're forced to write.
Yeah, and that feeling can be hard to combat if you're a daily writer or you're like a staff member. I always enjoyed being a contributor because I could sort of just contact my editor and say like, I really want to interview this band or I want to do something else. But yeah, that comes with a cost too, right? Because you're sort of at the will of what the schedule looks like, or if it's interesting, or if you're a staff writer, like you just show up every week and you're saying, what are you writing this week? And you've got 10 articles and that's it. And even if it's about something you have no idea about or you don't care about, you still have to write it. So
yeah, we get sometimes more so along the lines of just in the nature of being online. Sometimes when it comes to especially pitching news for 5 stories, sometimes it's just like a slow news week. It was, I think, a lot easier. I mean, I've been with Excalibur only during the pandemic. So I'm not sure, but I'm assuming that it was probably a lot easier to find stories when you could be on campus, when you could be, there were things always happening, right, especially in person. So I think there are some weeks where our editors are like, we don't have a 5th story because we don't know what else is happening with York. So yeah, sometimes it can feel a little bit of like a burnout when you're writing about, or you're writing like a certain amount of articles every week. Like sometimes our editors are taxed with 3 articles a week. And it can feel a little taxing. So that's why these kind of features or editorials are really great, because it gives you opportunity to like, ball's completely in your court. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sarah, do you have a few more minutes still?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Okay, a few more minutes. Yeah. Okay, cool. We can go a couple more questions. I was wondering, I was seeing here on your like a lot of your features have or articles have pictures and things like that are embedded. How do you handle things like captioning, descriptions, stuff like that for stories?
Yeah, so when it comes to like our headers and our decks, which is like the title, and then if you were to go on like the main page, the deck would be like the 1-sentence description underneath telling you what the article is going to be. Usually that is in the hands of whoever the editor is, whoever the contributor is that week. Essentially, the title is very cut and clean. It's here's what you're going to get in the article. And then our deck is just a little bit of like an introduction. Sometimes it can even be a quote from the article, and it's what do you think is going to best explain what the article is about. And while we do leave that up to our editors and to our contributors, sometimes when I go in and do like my substantive editings, we can kind of tweak it, make it a little bit more fitting to the paper. It's one of those things where with news, it's very like, it's once again very cut and dry. It's very like, here's what you're going to get. But when it comes to things like editorials and features, which I really love writing, they can get a little bit more creative in the title. Like the one that recently came out was mine. Is it silly to still feel scared? And that doesn't tell you exactly.
Nice, yeah.
it doesn't tell you exactly what the article is going to be yet. It just kind of invites you in, unlike news where we need to tell you right away, like, here's what you are getting. The editorial, it kind of draws you in a little bit. It doesn't tell you right away what it's going to be. So I always try to push that for features and editorials where you get the opportunity to be a little bit more creative, with it.
Nice. Yeah.
And then all of our photos are done by our incredible creative manager. She either finds the photos herself, sources them, or she, like this one was a photo that she had and then edited over the window pane. So that's not actually just taken as the window, like she photoshopped, she edited all of that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she's fantastic, really. And then in our feature, she does all of the drawings herself. Usually with the editorial, she does drawings as well. But yeah, so like mine, the holiday special, those are all things that she draws herself. She's a huge help. She also does all of our social media. So when it comes to like captioning for those photos, she's probably the one to talk to because she handles most of that. Yeah, that's kind of like our process of doing all of that.
Nice. Yeah. So, and then do you include videos? Or do you all do that? I can't remember if I've seen this every once in a while.
Hypothetically, we can. We haven't really, just because of being online, we haven't really had the chance to go in and film anything. I know in the past, the Excalibur has definitely done videos, but that was kind of before COVID times. Now that things are opening back up, there has been this conversation with RITI and with our board of publishers about potentially getting some equipment, going to film things, including those. But just for the nature of being online, we haven't really had the chance to. If we were going to do that, it would be like a video recorded like Zoom interview. I think that's
right.
We can do in terms of getting like original video, because just the nature like that we can't be on campus and we can't be at a lot of things that are happening. But that is something that in the future we really want to push towards is getting the video format in.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm just looking at the chat and seeing this. I don't know what that is, so we'll see how it goes. Well, very cool. It's nice to hear just about all the facets of Excalibur, and I know that right now I saw like an email from one of my colleagues that you're taking submissions, or you were at one point for Black History Month. So can you tell me like how that's going and sort of what's the latest on that end?
Our Black History Month issue will start publishing next Monday. We just gave our supplement coordinator a little bit more time, but Excalibur is something each year where we have supplements, and there are 3. We have an LGBTQ supplement, we have a Black History Month supplement, and then we have a Women's Day supplement. So essentially, we hire out members of the community to pitch us 8 to 10 stories, recruit writers themselves, and it kind of has to have a little bit of a theme. So the editorial kind of explains what the theme is. So for our LGBTQ supplement here, it was, what does it mean to be a good ally, and how do we create safe spaces on campus? And that was their theme. So our supplement coordinator for the Black History Month this year, Jada, I don't want to step on her toes and explain her idea a little bit too much, but she's really focused on like joy, benefiting, self-care. That's something that I think is really great when it comes to talking about Black History Month. So her features and her editorials and her articles will start publishing next Monday, and it will run for 2 weeks, and it'll be probably a story a day for 2 weeks.
Very cool. Yeah. And, I remember doing some of this stuff at a weekly paper too. And it takes a lot of coordination and planning, from range of contributors, and what have you. So best of luck with that. And actually, it's funny.
I was just going to say, contributors, our supplement coordinators, like we owe them the world, and also we understand how difficult it is, because for a lot of them, I think actually both of our coordinators, for our LGBTQ coordinator and then for our Black History Month coordinator, I believe they're both first and second year students, so they actually haven't had the chance really to be on campus yet. So for them to take on a role like this and to find writers and to recruit and to work, having never really been physically at York, is like a huge job, and they're doing great. They've done awesome so far.
Fantastic. Yeah, we'll give them a shout out next week too, because we're talking about anti-racist publishing practices. So yeah, we'll link to it once it starts coming out and in the near future too. That's awesome. Yeah. So last thing, I just want to ask you. First, I want to give a shout out just to Kelsey McComb. I know that I saw her on the front of this, and actually a student in one of my classes. So shout out to giving that little feature. Yeah, very cool. But yeah, I mean, just last question I wanted to put to you, Sarah, was convince listeners, why should they write for Excalibur?
I think the biggest thing for Excalibur is, it's something I've said 1,000 times and I will always continue to say, is that you don't really need prior journalism experience. This isn't like a publication, like I said, in other universities where it's often people who are in journalism are working with the publication. Like we are all students starting off the basis. And I always say that before anything, I am a student. Before I even say that I'm editor-in-chief, I'm a student. And I know that. We understand the time constraints. We understand the worries. We understand the anxieties. But the reason I say for people to come out and just start pitching and start writing and start signing up for articles is because it gives you experience. To say, even once again, I'm always thinking of the future, which is just me, the nature of who I am, panicking. It's always good to also have on a resume, to have that experience saying, like, I've been able to work with a student publication. I also think it's really great to get involved in any student publication, whether it's Excalibur or a different university, because it gets you involved in the community. It's funny, my friends will bring up things that are happening, like, oh, this is happening, I don't know what's going on. And I could say, oh, I know, because we did a story on it, because I got to edit it. It really does keep you informed with things that are happening with York, and it gets you more involved. Through things like Excalibur, I've gotten the opportunity to write for different publications. I've gotten the opportunity to, get different jobs and different internships because I've had this experience. More than anything, it's great to sign up and get that experience, especially if you're interested in a future in writing, even if it's not a future in journalism. I think just any future in writing, this will give you, I guess, a different experience in terms of like personal writing versus news writing versus this writing. It's good to have all of that under your belt. So whatever you choose to do in the future, I've got a little bit of experience now. We actually had a co-op student. Her name's Calissa, and she's amazing. She's 16, and she wrote for us. She wrote news for us. She wrote features for us. And I remember working with her, and she was like, I don't have any experience. I don't know how to do this. But now that she has the ability to go after she graduates high school, whether she goes into like post-secondary school or whether she goes into a job, and say, like, I've been published, which is a pretty cool thing to do. I was not doing that at 16. I was not that forward thinking. But yeah, I think the great thing about this is it just gives you that opportunity not only to get published, but to get involved with the community and to give you different experiences in writing.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, Sarah, so you're coming back next week, you said, right, on campus. Where do you typically go to write, or where do you think you would want to go write on campus, assuming that things are, safe and all that sort of stuff?
Things are going well. My favorite place is still Scott Library. I go to Scott Library. Anytime I'm on campus, I go to Scott Library. You have to book a space now. You can't just walk in and go sit down. You have to make sure you have a space booked. But my favorite is I just go to Scott Library, and I go on either like the 4th or the 5th floors, way up high. I go sit in the back corner, and then I write. Before the pandemic, my favorite place was to go to Scott Library, and then I would go sit in the stacks and write. I don't do that anymore.
Yeah. Okay. Well, go ahead.
I still like the atmosphere. I still like, sitting next to the books, writing. That's my favorite place. It's also nice to find a quiet place on campus, because apart from the libraries, I think it could be a little bit difficult. So yeah, I always go there. And then also, funny enough, last semester when I was on campus, I tried actually studying in the Stacy Library, which was like the engineering one, which I'm an art student. That's not my world. But I also really liked it there because same thing. It was just quiet. You're sitting amongst the books, and it kind of gets you in the mindset, gets you in the right place to start writing.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got to find that spot, and it's going to be hard to find for this next term, but hopefully in the future it'll be different. So, well, Sarah, this has been awesome. Thanks for joining us to talk about all your processes with Excalibur, and best of luck finishing up your tenure with Excalibur before you go on to more exciting things and graduate studies and all that. And yeah, we'll be sure to check out Excalibur moving forward, and hopefully I'll see you around at one of the libraries before you're.
Great. Well, thank you for having me too, though. It's been great being on here and getting to talk about the paper, and hopefully somebody out there is listening, and maybe we'll give it a shot. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, well, take care, and yeah, we'll talk to you soon. Okay.
All right. See ya.
Okay. Bye. All right. Folks, that was fantastic. Big thanks again to Sarah for joining us for the stream. And I just have a couple other comments to wrap us up here, and we are all good to go. So lots of things we can learn just again about what it means to write in an accessible way for news, for the web. It's a big task as editors, I can just say personally, to work with fellow writers and hold them accountable in ways for writing to be understood, especially in news and sort of editing ways, or other sort of editing context. I was mentioning Kairos, for example, and I just want to show you as we close up, this is kind of the guidelines we often have when we're thinking about submissions and so forth. I should just make sure that this is all good. Let's look through this. Yep. So one of the things that we ask for before even submissions, it's kind of an author's agreement, right, for a journal, is that we want to make sure that you've provided editable transcripts or closed captioning in all embedded media. So it's not enough to just submit those videos or to submit those audio files. You want to make sure you've already submitted that, you've already got that ready, so the editors can look at the whole thing and then don't have to sort of ask you in post. Like the submission is kind of considered incomplete if it doesn't have that. And also writing transcripts, I think it's pretty valuable for thinking about how your argument is sort of lining up. It's your own sort of way of planning your document rather than just sort of speaking. And anyways, think about it. If you're doing podcasts and so forth, if it's not a conversational one, for example, like we just had a nice chat with Sarah, you're probably going to write those transcripts a little earlier before you even start recording. And then you might edit it as you go. So there's some things you can do there. Another thing, too, is that there are all these programs out there now in the world that make it easy to capture transcripts. Otter.ai, for example, is a really good one for doing interviews because it's pretty accurate, for capturing meeting transcripts. You can even do this on Zoom. And I think Otter even has a partnership with Zoom now, if I'm correct, for it will try to capture the captions without really any, with some inaccuracies and so forth, if people are speaking fast or slow. But generally, I found this to be really helpful for doing interviews because you get 600 free minutes a month if you sign up. And I feel like on this stream, I'm always referencing these sort of free avenues that require signups and so forth. But that's one of the advantages of working in digital spaces is that you get these sort of free access things by giving them something, right? So you give them your sign up, and then maybe you're prompted if you like it, you can do it later. But I actually liked it so much that I signed up for a paid account, and I've used that with research assistants and collaborators for interviews. So it's really, really nice. And it just helps you make sure you've already got that accessible transcript started, while you're doing the interview. Because I think sometimes the accessibility part of doing these things may seem like a chore to folks because you have to do it after, right? And if you do this alongside, you're already in a great space for being more accessible. So that's another suggestion. There are several other ones that are out there that you might consider if you're doing any kind of this media work. But at the very basic, in the basic way, think about this page as a useful overview of what you need to do to write in an accessible way, especially for the web. So again, some links there. Okay, folks, so this hour went really quickly, and like I said, it was nice to kind of experiment, seeing what it's like to broadcast right from the professional writing lab that we have here, and to just be in solidarity with all of us who are masked up and staying safe here on campus. So that's all I have for this week. Before I go, I just want to mention once again that this is provided and sponsored by the Writing Center here at York and the Writing Department. So big thanks to them for linking up our past streams and so forth. We are here every Wednesday at 11:30 until April 6th. And then again, we have one-on-one appointments and other drop-in sessions that you might want to think about moving forward. We even have an accessibility specialist who can speak to a range of accessibility sort of dimensions, right, with your writing. So feel free to contact Kate Call. She is fantastic. And you can also talk to James Robertson to schedule an appointment. But folks, that's all I have, like I said, and I will talk to you all next week, and we'll have a great chat on anti-racist publishing practices and editorial guidelines. Other than that, have a great day and talk to you soon. Bye.